France is reeling from the brutal attack on the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo in Paris on Wednesday, in which 12 people were shot dead by masked gunmen, the worst terrorist attack the country has suffered for decades. The fear is that the perpetrators were so-called homegrown jihadis, inspired and possibly trained by radical Islamist groups. To discuss the implications of the Charlie Hebdo attack, I'm joined by Sam Jones, our Defence and Security Editor, and Roula Khalaf, the FT's Foreign Editor. Sam, let me come to you first. What do we know about these two suspects?
Well, at the moment, the picture is somewhat piecemeal. The security services in France, here in the UK, elsewhere in Europe, are still themselves putting together a picture of just who the perpetrators of this attack were. There are supposed to be 3 of them, 2 brothers and 1 other individual. As yet, obviously, not all of them have been captured. Some information has been released by the French police. They're saying they're seeking two brothers of Algerian descent, both of whom grew up in northern France. They're orphans. But it's not really clear how these people may have been radicalised, if they are indeed the perpetrators of this crime, or if they have any connections to foreign terrorist organisations such as ISIS or the Al-Qaeda network, whether they've travelled abroad, for example, or whether they've been in contact with those groups from France itself.
France has been the source, if you like, of the largest number of people who have gone from Europe to join jihadist groups in Syria and Iraq, for example. Tell us a bit more about the context in which this attack took place. Obviously,
the scale of the problem that the Syrian civil war and now the conflict in Iraq poses is significantly greater than any previous conflict that has involved foreign fighters joining Islamist groups. There are an estimated 5,000 foreign fighters fighting in Syria, of which more than 2,000 are from Europe. Of those, an estimated 1,000 are from France. The way the French have handled this so far is pretty similar to the way other European countries have done so. That is, by trying to build a database of names of those who have fled abroad or those who might come back, and to restrict the movements or the ability of those people to re-enter Europe or France. The other problem, though, is that there's still a significant number of sympathisers with the causes of foreign jihadist groups based in France itself and based in other European countries. So the question really that the security services have to answer, in France the DGSI, is whether these perpetrators, these gunmen, were themselves radicalised abroad or whether they were radicalised in France.
Roula, if we look at the broader issue of this radicalisation of people in France, but also across the rest of Europe, what do you see as the core cause of this? People often refer to the problem of disaffected youth, particularly from immigrant communities.
I think there's a long way from disaffected communities to terrorism. And I think that, there are several examples that we've seen of jihadis who are young people who are very well educated and from middle-class backgrounds who end up also in Syria or who end up blowing themselves up somewhere. So I don't think that being disaffected is actually the way that you become a jihadi. I think that there is another issue which we've seen develop over the past 15 years since 9/11, and that is that a lot of people feel that there's been an attack on their religion. And I think that is possibly a greater driver of radicalization than necessarily disaffected youth, or economically disaffected youth. I think there's also, and I think you notice that with especially the women who've ended up in Syria, women from Muslim communities in Europe. And I think there's something similar to a gang culture that has developed, a certain wicked, sick fascination with this world that is this utopia that is being created, that they think is being created.
Sam, have we seen anybody, for example, claim responsibility for this attack?
Not yet. There's been a couple of small pieces of information that have come in. One individual, a Twitter account linked to Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, has said, has praised the attacks, but it has not said that it was responsible for them. And obviously this goes back to the key question of whether these were individuals who were inspired to conduct an attack, or whether they were individuals who were directed and trained to conduct an attack by an organisation. As yet, we just do not know that.
President Francois Hollande in France has called for national unity. We've seen an outpouring of emotion in France. It seems like almost a kind of national unification around this issue. But politically, what are the threats here now?
I think what would worry me is that the reaction to this will be more a bolstering of the far right and a stronger anti-Islamic sentiment in Europe. Sometimes the reason that terrorist attacks take place is precisely in order to create this clash within Christian and Muslim communities, for instance, in Europe. And I think that there is a risk of that. And I think what you need to watch in France is concern over an overreaction to the attacks.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Roula. For all further news developments and analysis on the issue, please go to ft.com.